All right, Chapter 12, Part 3, the Conquest of the Americas. So the impact of the arrival of the Europeans was especially profound on the Native Americans. Spanish conquistadors, or Spanish word for conquerors, and priests arrived soon after the first explorers, which we talked about. They came to conquer native peoples, seize gold and silver, obtain natural resources, and convert the natives to Christianity. Soon after Columbus' first voyage, the Spanish conquered the main Caribbean islands. Small numbers of Spanish soldiers using horses and firearms and acting with local allies were quickly able to overcome large numbers of Native Americans. And in 1519, Herman Cortez sailed from Cuba to Mexico with a small force of soldiers in search of gold and silver. Cortez met the Aztec Emperor Montezuma. The Aztecs at first believed the Spaniards were gods and showered them with gifts. Later, Cortez left Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztecs, and made allies with the enemies outside of the Aztec territory. This would be a picture of Tenochtitlan at that time, what the Spanish would have seen, and this computer-generated image of what the Spanish would have seen. And this is what it looks like today. So you can kind of see very, very different climate from what the Spanish originally came in and saw. So the conquest of Mexico, with a few hundred Spaniards and several thousand Native American warriors, Cortez attacked Tenochtitlan in 1521. Several factors explain Cortez's final triumph. The Aztecs fought with clubs, spears, and bows, while the Spaniards had guns, steel swords, shields, dogs, horses, and cannons. The Spanish also gathered a large force of native warriors from the neighboring peoples who opposed the Aztecs. Finally, the Aztecs were worn down by an outbreak of smallpox and accidentally introduced by the Europeans. The Aztecs had no immunity to this disease. As a result, Cortez was quickly able to conquer the Aztec Empire. There's a picture of the Aztecs with smallpox disease. Here's the route that Cortez took, landed on the coast, coming in from Cuba, traveling across land, and then finally coming into the Valley of Mexico and Tenochtitlan. Conquest of Peru in 1530, Francisco Pizarro set sail from Panama, so he's leaving Panama to conquer the Incas of Peru. Pizarro arrived just when the Incas were recovering from a brutal civil war high in the Andes Mountains. Pizarro and a handful of soldiers faced a much larger force of Inca warriors, but again, the Native Americans could not resist the more technological advanced Europeans. Pretending friendship, Pizarro invited the Inca emperor to visit him. Pizarro and his army then ambushed the Incas, murdered the emperor. Pizarro was able to conquer the Inca capital by 1533. Spaniards treated the conquered Indians harshly. The defeated Indians were forced to accept Christian religion and of course, they were forced labor for their new rulers. It's a picture of the Inca emperor being captured and burned at the stake. So now what we have is colonial Latin America. So the Spanish conquest of the Caribbean, Mexico, and Peru brought many important changes. Although their exploration did not find the cities of gold that they were looking for, the Spanish asserted their dominance, religion, and culture on the native tribes. The region was transformed to what we call today Latin America, a fusion of European and Native American cultures. As a result of these conquests, Spain now ruled an American empire many times larger than Spain itself. Special royal governors, known as viceroys, were sent to rule the colonies in the king's name. Officials born in Spain filled most of the important positions, which we'll see later also, in the colonial government and in the military. Gold and silver from the Americas was shipped to Spain, making it the strongest power in Europe in the 16th century. Colonial society, the conquered lands were often divided among the soldiers. They used Native Americans to till the land and to work the mines. The system of forced labor was called encomienda system. Church leaders also came in and formed an elite class and shared political power with the soldiers. Priests sought to convert the Native Americans to Catholicism while preventing their actual enslavement. The Jesuits, which is a group within the Roman Catholic Church, the religious order founded the Counter-Reformation, built schools, founded hospitals for the Native Americans, taught agricultural skills. However, in 1767, the Jesuits were expelled from Latin America. Gradually, a new colonial order emerged. At the top of the society were noble officials and landowners who were born in Spain. So the Peninsulares were born in Spain, and they were the heart of the colonial society. They were the leaders of Latin America. Just below the Peninsulares is going to be the Creoles. Those are with Spanish background, but they're born in the New World. Below this group were a mix of Spanish and Native Americans, so the mestizos, which is part Spanish, part Indian, and then at the bottom would be your Native Americans who perform most of the hard work. Eventually, you're going to actually have enslaved slaves. Well, slaves come in from Africa. So meanwhile, the Native American populations declined because they had no immunity to the diseases from Eastern Hemisphere like measles and smallpox. Until the coming of the Europeans, the New World had been free of smallpox, typhus, and measles. Because of the sharp decline in the Native American population from these new diseases and overwork, the Spanish landowners in the Caribbean and Brazil needed a source of labor able to survive the harsh working conditions. As a result, they turned to importing Africans as slaves. So some of your other colonial empires other than Spain is New France. New France was established in Canada along the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. New France never became as populous as the Spanish or English colonies. It consisted of a handful of towns and a series of trading posts. French missionaries arrived from the Americas to convert the Native American Indians to Christianity. By the end of the 17th century, French territory covered almost 3/4 of North America, which you can see here in the yellow. The region continued to attract French explorers who found that the region contained valuable fur-bearing animals, especially beavers, whose pelts were greatly desired by Europeans for making hats. The Dutch also had their colonies, so other European colonies. New Netherlands, based on the explorations of Henry Hudson, the Dutch claimed control of the region around present-day New York. They set up a successful fur trade with the native peoples of the Hudson River Valley and called their colony New Netherlands. The Dutch government gave control of the colony to the merchants of the Dutch West India Company. In 1624, 30 families came to settle in Fort Orange, present-day Albany. More settlers arrived the next year and established a second fort at the tip of Manhattan Island. They named this settlement New Amsterdam after the Dutch city Amsterdam. The city of New Amsterdam, with its fine natural harbors, became a leading center for trade. English colonies. First permanent English colony in the New World was established by a private company at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. The first settlers were men who came in search of gold. Despite initial challenges, the colony at Jamestown became profitable by growing tobacco for the sale in Europe. The second English colony was founded by the Protestant group known as the Pilgrims. They landed at Plymouth Rock. Another group of English Protestants, the Puritans, landed in nearby Massachusetts Bay. In 1630, they came to practice their own religious beliefs without persecution. Eventually, the number of English colonies along the Atlantic coast and in North America expanded to the 13 colonies from Georgia to Massachusetts. So here's Massachusetts Bay, and then here, of course, is Plymouth Rock. And again, here's Jamestown, Virginia. Pictures of the Pilgrims at that time. Your original 13 colonies. Finding enough workers able to survive the harsh working conditions became a major problem for many of the colonies, especially in the Caribbean. The solution to the problem led to one of the most negative aspects of European conquest of the Americas, the rise of the slave trade. Slavery had existed in Africa long before the Europeans' intervention. However, the new Atlantic slave trade expanded the institution of slavery on a scale unparalleled in human history. Enslaved people were usually captured by powerful African tribes in raids on neighboring villages. The slaves were brought into the west coast of Africa, where they were imprisoned in fortified castles and traded to Europeans and African slave traders in exchange for guns and other goods. It is estimated that the Atlantic slave trade took away as many as 15 million African men and women over the next 300 years. More than 11 million of these went to the Spanish colonies. Many died during the Middle Passage, the voyage across the Atlantic. Because of the horrible conditions they endured on board of the ships, once they arrived in the Americas, most of the Africans worked long hours in the sugarcane fields of the Caribbean and Brazil, or toiled raising tobacco and cotton in North America. So what happened because of the slave trade? What you had is African warfare, tribes against other tribes to capture more slaves, to get more guns, rum, and things like that. Disrupted African culture. Okay, so the slave trade destroyed much of Africa's rich heritage and disrupted its development, created a legacy of violence, bitterness, and social upheaval. It did increase cultural diffusion, the exchange of ideas between the three groups. Now, slave traders brought in weapons from Africa, while these slaves brought in their different beliefs and legends, music and things into the Americas. So in the Americas now you would have the Europeans, the Native American Indians, and then Africans. So in summary, the Mayan, Inca, and Aztec people developed a complex civilization in Mexico, Central America, and Peru before the arrival of Columbus. They grew corn and many other foods unknown to the Europeans. They developed their own calendars, mathematics, and engineering skills. The Renaissance spirit of inquiring what, reason we talked about in class, and new technologies like the compass encouraged Europeans to engage in overseas exploration in the 1400s. Columbus' first voyage led to the first encounter between Europeans and Americans in 1492. This encounter led to the introduction of new foods, livestock, diseases in both hemispheres, known as the Columbian Exchange. The Spanish conquest of the Aztecs and Incas led to the European colonization of Americas, the introduction of Christianity, and the deaths of millions of Native Americans to European diseases. Europe was enriched from the plundering and colonizing of the Americas and from the increased trade. European colonization of the Americas had a great impact on Africa. Africans were now enslaved and shipped to the Americas during the Atlantic slave trade.